Good day, everybody, and welcome again to Not Just Business. Continuing on our rugby theme this week, I'm very fortunate to have on the line one of the world rugby superstars of the 21st century, and probably the most recognized South African internationally after Nelson Mandela. Welcome, Bryan Habana, and thank you for your time.
I think after Nelson Mandela, Siya Kolisi is now one of the most recognized South Africans globally. But yeah, thank you for the great introduction. It's an absolute pleasure to be on your show.
Thank you, man. Speaking of Madiba, I had the privilege of shaking his hand on 3 separate occasions, and all of them, felt like kind of surreal, almost something spiritual about the man, Of course, you would have had more than one conversation with him, I'm sure. How did that feel for you in his presence?
Awe-inspiring, to be briefly honest. I think I was one of the lucky few to have been there in 95 in the stadium, when he walked out there in that number 6 Springbok jersey. And as an 11-year-old youngster who never fully understood the game of rugby and what it was all about, seeing how Madiba used the power of sport and rugby in particular and the Springboks to unite the nation shows that forgiveness was at the forefront of his mentality. But in so doing, be at the leadership core of uniting a nation and allowing sport to impact and change the narrative that we had in South Africa. And again, I was fortunate to have met him on a few occasions throughout the course of my rugby career. I was fortunate enough to get birthday calls from him when I was sitting in Australia, playing rugby. And I think it is surreal. You have this perception or ideology about a person, and like I said, there was and there is almost something spiritual about that meeting. You sort of feel that it's an out-of-body experience, coming in such close proximity with greatness, to be brutally honest. And I think for that, I'm extremely grateful that rugby gave me the platform where I was able to meet Nelson Mandela on a few occasions. I think, I do have a few regrets from rugby. One of them was definitely not taking up Zelda Lagrange's offer of going to have dinner with my girlfriend at Madiba's residence, which just because of timing and the schedule didn't unfortunately ever allow me to. And looking back now, I possibly missed out on trying to get Madiba's autograph on one of my test match jerseys.
So I imagine when young rugby fans meet you, it's like a similar experience for them. I'm in the presence of a rugby god, How do you feel about that?
I think the Generation Z players, I think I'm grateful that my rugby career wasn't in black and white, but I don't quite think, they accept not watching rugby in HD at the moment. And some of the pictures of, my early years of rugby definitely wasn't HD quality television. That experience in 95 was a watershed moment, one in my career. Wanting to be the next English or next South African export into the English Premiership from a soccer perspective, named after Brian Robson and Gary Bailey. Yeah, it was sort of, a watershed moment being at that experience in 1995 and being inspired to take up the game of rugby. And that moment sort of ignited a fire to hopefully one day try emulate. I was one of 1 million, 2 million, 3, 4 million boys in South Africa that wanted to grow up and do the same, wanted to play for the Springboks. And in so doing, try unite the nation. I was one of the fortunate few that got the privilege and honor of getting to play for my country, getting to pull that national jersey over my head. And that was because of inspiration given to me by that 95 group. So extremely grateful for that. And I think while you're busy with your rugby career, you hope that you're doing things in a way that potentially inspires a new generation of players, inspires a new caliber of players to want to pick up the mantle of what that privilege and honor it is to be a Springbok. And I think I'm extremely grateful throughout my career that I was involved in some absolutely incredible teams under some incredible coaches, captains, and success stories that, united a nation, for which I'm extremely grateful.
I was present within quite close proximity to 2 of the defining moments of the 95 World Cup. I actually happened to have a seat on the 22-meter line, exactly where Peter Hendricks ran past David Campisi to score that try that sent the world into ecstasy, the South African world. It's not often that I've seen so many grown men cry. And I was one of them.
Yeah, it was almost one of the first times I actually witnessed grown men crying. I was also fortunate enough to be in Newlands that day. I was behind the poles on the opposite end of the field to which Peter de Villiers scored that try. But just seeing how this group of players brought a nation together, seeing how grown men, I'll never forget, when that game, when the final whistle went, my dad got hugged by a gentleman in front of him who had the new South African flag painted on his face, and that flag got smudged onto my dad's cotton traded Springboks jacket, which made my dad extremely upset because this was his most prized possession that he wanted to be wearing for the next 7 weeks. And now he had to go wash it and get this new South African flag, which was extremely symbolic, and a white South African in a fairly new democratic country wearing a new flag that, wasn't a part of the old apartheid era, which was really special. Over and on top of that, to see grown men crying was something to behold for an 11-year-old boy in the stands.
I can imagine. And then at the final, I was behind the post, exactly in line with Joel Janke's drop kick at the end. I still maintain I was the first guy in the world on my feet.
Well, I'm not quite sure we can go look at the footage. I mean, Chester Williams is unfortunately he is the only player not to be pictured because he's standing behind, I think it's the right-hand post. So he's actually not even in that photo of that epic, drop kick that goes over. I was on the 22-meter, again, where Joel was actually standing and kicked the ball over. So, yeah, I sort of saw that ball flying horizontally through the poles. And again, see a stadium and a nation erupt was absolutely fantastic.
So you went to KES?
I did go to KES, yeah.
For the uninitiated, that's King Edward VII School, one of the most famous public schools in South Africa. And apparently you kicked off your rugby in the under-14G team. Okay, as a scrum half, I believe, eh?
Yeah, I did. I've sort of been inspired to pick up the game of rugby a year before and, went into King Edwards with these massive dreams of, becoming the best rugby player King Edwards has ever seen. I was a year younger to my classmates or my form mates, and I was only 5 years old. They were all 13 already and turning 14, and I was probably half the size of Enrico January, which gives you an indication of how small I was, and sort of wore shoulder pads, and on wearing shoulder pads, my neck disappeared, and I couldn't pass it to the left because I'd never played rugby before, but I've just now been inspired to pick up the game, and they sort of had trials in terms of you got this massive conglomerate of people coming together from various different primary schools, and they sort of had an indication who's going to be in the A team and B team because those guys were selected almost before coming to the school. And there I was, this scrawny little scrum half, couldn't pass my left hand. I was one of the quickest. So in those testings, I was sort of up the ranks more towards the D's or the C's. But then I couldn't kick a ball. I couldn't pass to the left, and then sort of got slowly nudged down to the G side. And, my first ever game for the G side, playing on 8 o'clock in the morning in the winter in Joburg is not always fun, but scored 2 tries, absolutely loved this new game I'd now been introduced to. And in so doing, just continued building. I think the next week I played for the under 14 B side because I saw there was a little bit more than just a small runt that was running around. There could be some talent. But again, it wasn't about where I started. I think for me, and like anything in life, it's about just starting. And, if I had delayed that process a year or 2 or 3 later, my development could have potentially taken a little bit longer.
So at one stage, Jake White said to you, probably after school, if you want to get good at this game, you want to reach the top level, you've got to be bigger, stronger, and faster. I mean, most people would have said, oh, shit, I'd rather take up snooker or something. Man, that's a tall order. Get bigger, stronger, and faster. But obviously it didn't put you off, and you did. So tell me how you did that.
Well, first and foremost, get to that point, that was just, when I was about 20 years old, when I got into contact with Jake for the first time. I think getting to that journey from a 13-year-old boy that gone to King Edward, there was the various steps of learning how to pass my left hand, continuing upskilling. I knew I had talent, but it was making myself not only mentally aware of what's going on around me, the rugby environment, it was sort of continue developing my own set of skills that could make me unique. There were some incredible coaches along the course of my career, but there were also some setbacks. I'll never forget in my standard 9 year, I'd been kept back a year to help out with under 16, and I got selected to play for the Lions under 19s at a tournament weekend. And on choosing that, I actually got dropped from the A side to the C side because my under 16A coaches believed that it was more important to be playing for the school than what it was going out and playing a weekend of provincial rugby, which, was disappointing, but also sort of made me understand that I can't put all my eggs into one basket if I want to succeed at this game of rugby. That I need to be able to learn to deal with setbacks, and that developmental process over the course of those early years, and exposing me to the different elements of rugby, the different elements of what I needed to overcome both mentally and physically, sort of put me in a mindset of working extremely hard, that when luck did come and a coach saw you and spotted you, that you were ready to grab the opportunity. And as the famous saying of Gary Play goes, the harder you work, the luckier you get. So I think those instances of actually building myself mentally, physically, and trying to make sure that when opportunities did arrive, that I was prepared, was extremely important. And then Lofi Elof moved me from scrum half to centre, where, my prominent rise to the top came to the fore. And again, that was an extremely volatile decision, which I was very hesitant to make. But, had the mentorship and the vision of someone like Eugene Elof, who played an important role in that transition. He made me not just immediately make a decision. He made me write an expose on centre play, and he made me look at a player in particular, which I chose Brian O'Driscoll, to be funny about it, and literally had to write like a 3-4-page, 5-page essay about synopsis about centre play. What's going to make me better, just so that I could understand this new dynamic that I'd be involved in. And then got to meet up with Jake White, who in 2002, a year prior, had just won the Under-21 World Cup with the Springboks Under-21 side. And he said to me, listen, if you want to make it, you got to get bigger, stronger, quicker. You got to look at the likes of Clyde Rathbone, who went from being the captain of Under-21 to playing for the Brumbies, getting close to representing Australia. The likes of Jock Fourie, Jean de Villiers, Maurice Joubert, guys that were maybe a little bigger, stronger. And I mean, at school, I think I only went to gym for the first time ever when I was 17 years old, Derek. So it was really important to not only mentally adapt as great as possible, but in this new professional era, start physically developing as well. So yeah, that was an important moment also in my career in terms of Jake seeing the potential, but also knowing that for me to actually reach that level. Now, I think I picked up 6 or 7 kilos that one December in 2003, bulked up a little bit, both not only physically, but sort of in the gym as well and muscularly. And in so doing, laid a great foundation, which kept me for most of my career.
I was working for a company that actually sponsored that Under-21 World Cup at Ellis Park. So I handed out the trophies. So I knew how big those guys were. I think Farid Depriya, who was, one of the smaller guys, he was taller than me, and I'm not short by any means. And I'm 1.84. So
wow, yeah, Skalkberger's hand must have engulfed yours when he collected his trophy.
Yeah, and Pedro Vandenberg and all those guys. Yeah. Anyway, I remember you mentioned the good coaches and captains that you played under, that you've learned from. What, in your opinion, are the traits that make a good coach? What are the characteristics that you look for?
First and foremost, coach definitely is someone with a vision. All the coaches I've played under, each and every one of them has had a clear and distinct plan of what they want to achieve. I think those that then go on to achieve success methodically are always take accountability for the decisions they make, for the way the team and the direction in which the team goes. They take responsibility for everything that happens, through the success and the failures. They sometimes, during the success, take a step back to allow the players to enjoy that. But in the times of dire straits, they actually step to the forefront and take responsibility for the happenings. I think the coaches that have become successful have been extremely methodical in their approach on the vision that they wanted to achieve, even through the tough times and the bad times. Heineke Meyer went through, I think, 12 straight losses in Super Rugby in 2002, correctly. Jake White went through a year in 2006 where he lost, I say he, but we as a team lost 49-0 against Australia in Brisbane. Went on a run of 6 consecutive losses, which was almost one of the worst records the South African side has ever had. Almost got fired towards the end of 2006, but just kept his resilience, kept his belief in the vision and goal and dream that he had to be a successful coach. And in so doing, went on to become a World Cup winner. Peter de Villiers, through the tough times, people telling him that he doesn't deserve to be there, became the first ever Springbok coach to win in the professional era 2 games over in New Zealand, which no coach, not Jake, not Heineke, not Alex, has been able to do. They beat the British Night Lions series, beat the All Blacks 3 times in 1 year to win the Tri-Nations, doing it by beating the All Blacks in Hamilton in 2009. So, all of these coaches, I think their player management is extremely good because they need that in order for the players to be performing at their optimal. Their vision is unwavering in what they want to achieve from a success perspective. And they build a squad around their perceived strength in terms of leadership, players that are needed to be able to achieve those goals and dreams.
One of your best tries, I think, and I've seen all of them, was for the Blue Bulls, strangely enough, against the Sharks in the 2007 Super Rugby final in Durban. And I've had a look at that try from various angles, and that gap that you took, I mean, it opened up for us, and there was a lot going on in front of you. I mean, the whole Sharks team was there, and suddenly, for a split second, there was this gap, and you were still quite fired. I think you were under 22, and you saw it, and you took it. So what do you ascribe that to? I mean, that's a split-second decision, split-second seeing it and going for it, and that's something you can't coach. So
yeah, well, as I said, the harder you work, the luckier you get, and I think the self-belief in the team at that stage, France saying had just missed the conversion, and we sort of knew our backs were against the wall. We probably didn't deserve to beat the Sharks that day. We weren't the better team. The Sharks, really played a great brand of rugby, and we found ourselves in a fortunate position that we were still in the game. There was a lot of things. Push James didn't kick the ball out. France didn't kick the ball out. Somehow we got the ball at the bottom of a ruck. Derek Keane, and I tell everyone, I know it was a potentially defining try in my rugby career, but it wasn't meant to be. I literally, as Heinie Adams passed me that ball, I just saw this flock of Sharks players running towards the corner flag, and because I knew we had the penalty advantage, my honest first initial idea on receiving that ball was just to run inside to be able to be closer to my forward support so that we can set up another ruck and be able to then recycle the ball to score. But yeah, like I say, the harder you work, the luckier you get. And as I stepped inside, an absolutely massive gap that opened up like the Red Sea. And I tell everyone, as much as the Shark supporters really hate me for that moment, I actually didn't score the winning points against the Sharks. It was Derek Hogarth who cool, calm, and collectively, slotted the winning kick with a Bush James bearing down on him from 3 meters. So yeah, it was a team effort. I can't say yes, I scored the try, but it was the resilience, it was the character in that Bulls team, from Anton Leonard to Victor Matfield, Freddie Freer, everyone involved, Heineken Meyer, and again, grateful to be at the receiving end of such an iconic moment. But I can't take credit for how that went down.
So that was 2007. That was a couple of months before the World Cup. Did the guys still talk to you in the Springbok camp after? The Sharks boys.
Yeah, it was a very difficult one, to be brutally honest. Obviously, first and foremost, I probably in today's rugby I wouldn't have been on the field. I had that early incident 7 minutes into the game where I sort of lost my footing and took Percy Montgomery out in the air, and again wasn't even yellow carded, and that might have been very different. But all of a sudden, that game comes to an end. You have got to know the opposition players in a Springbok environment so well over the course of the last 3 years, and the disappointment, the despair that was going through their ranks, going through their team at that moment was something that even on the outside we could definitely feel. And I think one of the most defining moments, I think for me in that 2007 year, was that following evening when, as a Springbok side, we all had to come together in Bloemfontein, put our differences aside, the ones that had victory, the ones that had defeat, and say, yes, that would happen 24 hours ago, but the next 24 weeks, we now have to be together to be able to achieve greatness as a Springbok contingent. And seeing the way, as Bulls, we sort of humbled ourselves in victory, but the way in which the Sharks pragmatically accepted what happened yesterday, and as tough as it was to put it behind them, stood up and was proud in terms of coming into that Springbok setup. And, that Sunday night in Bloemfontein, really laid the foundation to where we would go to, 3 months later.
Yeah, okay. So one of the things you had to do, you decided to do, was to move to France to go and play for Toulon. I would imagine that's not an easy decision, and there's quite a few things that you have to consider. And what were the factors that you took into account in moving to France?
Derek, there were quite a few factors I had to take into consideration. I'd gone from moving from the Lions to the Bulls, where everyone said, that's the worst rugby decision I'm ever going to make as a 21-year-old. Then went on to win rugby five. Then went from the Bulls to the Stormers, and everyone, sort of said, how can I give up the Blues and the rivalry between North and South? And that's going to be the worst decision, which again, I don't think it really was. even though I had probably most of my best years at the Bulls. But yeah, again, I live in Cape Town now, so that sort of tells that it was a good decision for me. And then the decision to go to France, I think, was an interesting one. I've been approached on a number of occasions before that point in 2012, and it was post 2007, post 2009. And I think there was always an inevitable concept that I would be at some point making my way overseas. I think I delayed it almost until 2013 because I just felt at that point I'd had 9 years of Super Rugby, when Super Rugby really was still Super Rugby, playing against the best teams week in, week out, for a 14-week consecutive period. And just felt that not only as a person, but also as a rugby player, I wanted to develop myself a little bit more, being able to push the boundaries to still be playing a level of rugby that could see me be selected for the Springboks for the 2015 Rugby World Cup. Be involved in an environment where you're around some of the best players the game has ever seen, the likes of Johnny Wilkinson, Carl Heyman, and Matt Gittard, Drew Mitchell, reunited with Bucky Squirter, John Smith, Ali Williams, the Armitage brothers. That environment sort of to continually adapt and learn and become better and improve, and in so doing, allow me to be playing a standard of rugby that could justify my selection within a Springbok side, and in also so doing, not be comfortable with what I had achieved, and hopefully in doing so, as a rugby player, get pushed to the limits, but also as a person, being engulfed in a foreign environment where the language is extremely foreign. You're away from family, friends, support structure, and in so doing, grow and develop as a person as well.
Yeah. How different is French club rugby from Super 15 rugby?
Well, there's various different levels of looking at it. In the Southern Hemisphere, the biggest contrast is that you have Super Rugby, and it's just Super Rugby. Once that competition is done, you have a week or two break, and then you go into a Currie Cup locally in South Africa, or MPC or ITM Cup in New Zealand. But over in the Northern Hemisphere, you have two competitions intertwined over the course of the season. So, you're playing 4 or 5 weeks of top 14 rugby against some of the toughest clubs in and around France. All of a sudden, you got to put a European hat on, and you're playing Heineken Champions Cup for 2 weekends, and a totally different type of rugby. So again, I don't want to say the one's stronger than the other. There are benefits to both. There are pros and cons to both. I don't think many South Africans understand what it's like to play a game on the 31st of December at 9 o'clock on a Sunday night in Paris when it's minus 2 degrees. And you compare that to playing on the high veld. It's not quite the same. So definitely are different challenges for both. I'm extremely grateful that I was able to be involved in team environments, both in the Southern and Northern Hemisphere, in which we were successful. That first season in France, despite injuries on a personal level, we won the double. So we won the top 14 and the Heineken Cup in the same year, which was the first time ever in our club's history. And, in so doing, we went on a run of winning 3 Heineken Cup champions in a row. And I think, that sort of allowed me not only to develop as a rugby player, but be involved in this foreign environment as a person, to grow and develop, learn a bit of the language. Obviously, post 2007, there was a little bit of a love affair with France, given how well the Springboks did in 2007. And I'm extremely grateful for that opportunity. My second little boy was born in Toulon in 2018. And again, there's a little bit of a love association now that will hopefully go on for a very long time with France.
And you even went to study there, yeah? You got your IT diploma. What was it?
No. So I started studying BSc IT at RAL back in 2001. I unfortunately didn't finish because rugby became a priority really early on. And when my computer science teacher, I think in my second year, said to me, Mr. Habana, you need to decide whether you're going to be playing rugby or studying. I don't quite think she understood what options she was giving me. So I unfortunately didn't finish my IT degree. But I then, towards the end of my career, went back and did a business unit manager course at the Toulouse Business School. And the reason for that, obviously, with the transition in professional sports being as big a narrative as it is, and rightly so, because it is one of the toughest things to go through when you've been doing something you love for 10 to 15 years. And to be brutally honest, people say while you're playing rugby or professional sports, you need to find the balance. But for me, I wanted to be the best rugby player and the best in my position for a 10, 15-year period. And, you're not going to find any balance when you're striving towards being the best. You're putting all your energy and focus into achieving success. And like I said previously, the harder you work, the luckier you get. And one of the non-negotiables that I definitely had was working as hard as I could possibly work enabled to be ready for the opportunities that presented themselves. But knowing that the transition was going to be happening and being able to sort of now put a different hat on and upskill myself, being able to understand business terms like, your marketing mix, your digital strategy, learning basic law, basic accounting, and in so doing, prepare myself physically and mentally for the challenges that were to lie ahead for the transition period.
A lot of senior superstars in the game are not quite prepared for life afterwards. And you often see quite sad stories. I think the most tragic one that I remember is the case of Marc Sessegnon, the French rugby captain who a couple of years after he retired, he just couldn't get used to it, depression and alcoholism. And eventually went on in 2004, I think he shot his ex-wife at a party in front of 60 guests, went to jail for murder, came out again. Few months later, he was back for some other charge of assaulting a policeman. So, I mean, that's an extreme case. But I mean, a lot of people aren't prepared. What advice would you give people in your position to prepare for life after serious sport?
I mean, there's a lot of advice. I think first and foremost, and I probably tried it as much as I could throughout my career, understanding that you should try your best to not have your identity lay in whatever personal sport you're involved in. If you're only worried about the fame, the glory that comes with being a professional rugby player, being a professional cricketer, winning World Cups, being the best soccer player in the world, whatever that might be. If you have your identity in that, when that all of a sudden gets taken away and you lose that identity, I think the mental challenges that come with that are so adverse that you do get those extreme cases. In rugby, we had Dan Bickerman, the Australian lock, who, South African born, but, had a fantastic career, went to play in the Northern Hemisphere, went to go actually study at one of the big universities, Harvard or Oxford, and then started doing really well in the corporate sector back in Australia, moving up to senior level management within the space of a couple of years, but also struggled, couldn't cope. And again, we don't know the reasons why, but committed suicide, with a young family. And yeah, I think for me, it's trying to find that identity in yourself first and foremost. You're not allowing your identity to be stripped away from you, because no matter how much you want to be playing whatever, whether it be rugby, soccer, cricket, doing professional sports for your whole life, it is unfortunately a very small time period in the greater scheme of life. And I think for me, that identity and where you put it is extremely important. Upskilling yourself in certain areas that allow you to then make the transition a little bit easier in terms of understanding a bit of budgets, understanding Excel spreadsheets, finding a love outside of rugby or your passion of your sport. And I think in so doing, being able to relate to other things, when that is then taken away, have a support structure around you that keeps you unique, keeps you who you are, potentially keeps your feet on the ground through the highs, but supports you through the lows and is always constantly there. A team that supports you, that you can trust, that you can understand, is only there because of you, the person, not you, the professional athlete. And in so doing, I'm going to be the first to say I have been absolutely horrendous from a training regime perspective over the course of the last two years. But yeah, just having people in your corner, I think is extremely important. Having people you can talk to, having people around you who you can trust in knowing how you tick, how you function, and potentially see some signs, as small as they might be, of things not going according to plan, and being able to try to be open and honest about it. Don't think you're the only one going through it, because there's quite a number of athletes that have had to go through that experience, and trying to share as much as possible.
So what's on the horizon for you now? What are you busy with? Short, medium-term plans?
Yeah, I think, the long-term goal is to try and make a success of the life of professional sports. That's a very open-ended result. But yeah, I've been pretty fortunate, to be briefly honest. The transition has been, fairly comfortable for me. I've understood the value that is creating a brand while playing professional sports. So working with some of the biggest brands globally, forming long-term relationships with Adidas, Land Rover, doing some punditry over in the UK. I launched a digital sports marketing agency called Retroactive 2 years ago on coming back to South Africa. And I've just co-founded a fintech company called Pay Me Now, which goes around giving employees early access to a percentage of their already earned wages responsibly as a financial inclusion and wellness program through employers. So Yeah, I've been very fortunate. Got to spend 6 weeks in Japan with Mastercard and Channel and ITV, doing some punditry, doing some stuff on the Seventh Circuit with HSBC, and I think in so doing, understood the value that constantly evaluating and reevaluating your brand throughout your rugby playing career and trying to be as professional as possible in those engagements with sponsors, with corporates, and using that network to be able to tap into post the career has become extremely important and has made the transition a little bit easier. I'm not going to lie to you, it is not easy at all, but it definitely has helped in putting certain things into place.
So, Bryan Gary Habana, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. I have no doubt that you're going to make a huge success of the future, and we'll be rooting for you. And all the best, man. Thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, Derek, thank you very much. Hopefully we can maybe chat in a couple of years' time when I am either selling my fintech company to a venture capitalist over in the US or in the UK. But yeah, thank you for your platform of being able to share, being able to engage, and looking forward to hopefully chatting in a couple of years' time.